Hi, this is Darin White, Executive Director of the Center for Sports Analytics at Samford University, and this is a one-on-one with ADC Partners.
Hi, this is Dave Helmy of ADC Partners, and let's start with an admittedly tortured analogy. Using a data and analytics is a little like going to the gym. You know it's important and good for you, but man, can it be hard to get started. Now, no one knows this better than my guest, Dr. Darin White, the Executive Director of the Center for Sports Analytics at Samford University in Birmingham, Alabama. You see, in this role, Dr. White has created the leading sports analytics program in the nation. But it's not your typical ivory tower stuff. I'm far from it. Dr. White and his students are working with sports teams and big sports marketing brands to make the best use of the oceans of data that surround them. And the result is produced measurable results for everyone involved in these partnerships. In our conversation, we talk about the evolution of sports marketing from being a CEO's plaything to an integral part of the marketing mix, how that evolution has placed new demands on teams and brands, and why the effective use of data and analytics is now critical to sports marketing partnerships. Oh, and you can also calm down because he explains why artificial intelligence isn't coming for your job. Yet. Enjoy. Darin White, let's wind back the clock a little bit, if we could, because you started your career in academia, and you were teaching marketing classes at Union University, and but you were also the head soccer coach. So I'm curious, as someone who's obviously gone to great heights in data and analytics and sports marketing and all those things, I'm wondering how that time at Union, with both teaching classes and coaching, sort of laid a foundation for where you find yourself today. Can you go on a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, back in those days, I had no idea that I'd be doing what I'm doing today, because honestly, back in those days, this didn't even exist.
Yeah.
And I run a program in sports marketing and analytics in our business school at Samford University. And 20 years ago, there was not a single business school in the nation that had anything like this. So
I think we were still using abacuses at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was actually 20 years ago, University of Oregon started the very first sports marketing program. And so anyway, so back in those days, I was coaching college soccer. I had my PhD in marketing. So I really had these two different lives that seemed to have nothing in common at all.
Right.
I will say, I often thought to myself, this is the weirdest thing in the world. I spent half my day teaching MBA level marketing strategy, and the other half day recruiting, soccer players from Africa or whatever. And so, it just seemed like, what's going on right here, right? Well, that was all laying the groundwork, though, for the day that is now upon us. So, and so basically the story was, when I got done with coaching, after about 10, 11, 12 years of coaching, I was ready to try something different. And I'd kind of learned sports marketing and analytics through my own team. It was sort of a living lab, if you will. And so I'd done all of this with my own team, but then when Samford came a calling and say, hey, we're thinking about wanting to start a program. Oregon has started one, and we're thinking about being the first school in the South to do something like this. And you'd be perfect, because I've already had the PhD, already had all the academic training, but then I also had all this experience with sports.
Yeah, you ticked all the boxes.
Yeah. And so I was like, wow, that sounds really cool. Plus, I'm from Birmingham, and Samford's in Birmingham, so it was a chance to come back home. So we jumped at it. My wife and I just like, let's do this. And so after 50.
So it's fair to say then that it was really the coaching part of it that sort of first gave you an inclination of how data, how analytics could improve or inform your experience. Can you pinpoint that moment, or what it was when you look back at your coaching experience and said, oh, wow, I could really use this effectively?
Yeah, it was actually at the National Collegiate Soccer Association National Conference one year. About 3 or 4 years into my college coaching career, I got to hear a talk by Anson Dorrance, who's a women's soccer coach in North Carolina. I won, I don't know, golly, 25.
A bunch.
Yeah.
I think that's the technical term.
Yeah. At one time, he was the winningest coach in American sports history, period. I mean, not
full stop.
Anyway, so he presented on his sort of analytics approach that he actually got from Dean Smith, interestingly enough. And so basically Anson tracked every single time a player was on the field, every shot they took, everything they did was tracked, and when it was recorded. And so I adopted that because as an academic, I thought, oh, this really sounds pretty cool. So I went out.
Okay, so it scratched that itch a bit for you too, didn't it?
Yeah. And so I started collecting all this data, and we would publish it and put it up, and we started using it. And interestingly, all of a sudden we started having a lot more success on the field too. We started more games, and the players loved it. And so that was really, it was Moneyball for soccer before there was even such a thing, really.
That's before Moneyball was even Moneyball. You were soccer ball. Right.
Yeah.
But it's not like marketing is devoid of data, right? That other side of your personality, that other side of your experience, it's not like marketing doesn't use a lot of data or try to inform their decision making using data even 20, 25 years ago. So I'm curious, right? So, sports has always used and always had access to a ton of data and analytics, right? Just, reading the baseball, box scores as a kid, right? Just laden with data. And similarly, like I just said, marketing has always had a bunch of data through surveys and focus groups and all the things that they try to do there. But it feels like the combination of those two things, sports marketing, has lagged a bit in using data, right? It was like, that sort of apocryphal story of, the CEO likes golf, so let's sponsor a golf tournament.
Right.
Why do you think it lagged?
Yeah. Well, so sports 20 years ago no one thought of sports as a business. Yeah. Like that whole concept. And it really back in the, up to about 2000, most people would think of sports. Even the NFL was thought of more in terms of almost like a nonprofit. It was more, you go to a team. Yes, a team would go. In fact, one of our board members is the senior vice president of partnerships for the Braves. Okay. And he's worked for 30 years. And he remembers the days when they would just sort of go around to the companies in Atlanta and say, hey, do you want to give us some money? And we'll put up a sign on the fence. That was about it. That was it.
Very technical.
Yeah. And now you just look at where the revenue generation is going on in pro sports when it comes to partnership marketing. It's in the billions and billions of billions of dollars, way more sophisticated, lots of data collected, in terms of measurement and all of that. And so it's really, it's just the whole way we view sports as a business has changed. And I got a theory as to why that is.
I want to hear it.
Okay. Yeah. So, and again, this is coming from one of my board members, who's the president of an NFL team. Mm-hmm. We asked him this back a few years ago, and his theory was that it all goes back to Jerry Jones. And it goes,
God, why did I feel? I had this like weird feeling that Jerry Jones's name was going to come up, but okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no doubt. And so, according to in the board member I'm talking about is Rich McKay, the president of the Falcons, and Rich at the time was working for the Tampa Bay Bucks. And he even says, I remember back in the 90s, 85% of our revenue at the Bucks came from one check, the media rights check from the NFL office. So he said, we really didn't do much of anything to we just got the big check and hey, right.
You didn't even need to sell a ticket. You got 85% of your revenue just got sent in.
Yes. And so Jerry Jones was really the first one that started recognizing the revenue generation potential of the Cowboy brand and started becoming really innovative in driving revenue. And he's been doing it for 25 years. And then other NFL teams were like, we gotta keep up. Right. And then it went from the NFL to MLB, and now it's literally gone around the world, and it's even gotten to college football now. And so it really goes back to that according to Rich.
Well, and it's funny, you think about how even, I don't want to use the word controversial, but it was kind of shocking thing. I think a lot of the other NFL owners is like, hey, wait a minute, we've got a league deal with Coca-Cola and you're selling huge partnerships to Pepsi. There was this kind of shock and awe aspect of what they were doing. And some, I think, owners were even commenting on, is that even the right thing to do? Seems almost quaint now looking back for it with the money-making machine that is the NFL and how they carve out categories and all those things like that, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and college sports is another good example of that. It was again another one of my board members, Jim Host. And Jim Host was he was the first one that convinced the NCAA to have partnerships for their, what at that time was called the NCAA men's basketball tournament. Like that was it. And so,
we are dipping back into history a little bit here, aren't we?
So he was literally, it was Pizza Hut. He actually convinced people. I don't know if you remember back in the day, but they had those little small basketballs. And that was the first major partnership, and it took him years to convince the NCAA to actually even do that, because and then the very first time they did it, he tells the story. It's actually in his book. Mr. Host released a book on the business of college sports, which is really interesting. But he tells the story about how he had a warehouse in Memphis with 10,000 of these basketballs, and literally after the first two games of the tournament, Pizza Hut called them up and said, "We're out of basketballs. Help."
That's a lot of basketballs.
Yeah. And so anyway, so that was the beginning of the whole college sports kind of getting into this whole space of revenue generation. And so it is a remarkable how far we've come in terms of adopting business practices in sports in the last 20 years.
And it's also, we are talking about a relatively, in the history of marketing and things like that, we are talking about a relatively short span of time in which I think brands in particular, and I want to shift the lens a little bit away from teams for the moment and talk a little bit about the brand side and how they use marketing to take all that data and use it effectively, right? And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges associated with it. And I'm curious as to, in your experience in the brands that you've looked at that are using data and analytics to shape their approach to partnerships and sports marketing, what brands are doing it the best, and what separates them from their peers, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a great question. And right off the bat, who comes to mind is Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
We've done a couple of projects with Coca-Cola. We had one of their top executives on our advisory board, and Coke collects an incredible amount of data around all of their sport partnerships. And of course, they spend, hundreds of millions every year on their sport partnerships. Like, in fact, Coca-Cola calls them their toys, but they have, you think about, I think they have, at least the last time I checked, they had 12 NFL teams, College Game Day. They've got the U.S. women's national team, which is of course about to play a big tournament coming up. And so
Coke, an incredible array of properties.
Yeah, huge array of properties. And so Coke does a great job, though, of measuring the effectiveness of all of those different partnerships against their marketing objectives.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big part of the challenge, is always, because every brand is going to have a different objective that they're trying to achieve with those partnerships. And so therefore the measurement has to take that into account, right? And so, but you are right, as far as data, we now have access to data like we never have before with all the social data. We work quite a bit with a company called Zoom. We work with we actually have access to their data, so we use a lot of their data. So there's just a lot more data out there now to measure these partnerships.
Do most of the partners, like the brands, do they come to you saying, look, we have this data, we don't know what to do with it, and we want your help interpreting it? Or is it more along the lines of, more broadly, a help? Like, we know we should be using data, we just don't really know how.
Yeah.
Is it the latter?
Yeah, honestly, it is. Most even companies and teams both.
Yeah,
kind of on both sides of it. They because again, it used to be back in the day, the reason that a brand had sport partnerships back in the day was maybe, again, because the CEO loved whatever, so therefore we want to have a box at the game, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna do it. Nowadays, those decisions are made with much more sort of marketing strategy in mind, and they think of their marketing, their sport marketing assets as a portfolio, and how do we reach our audiences? So there's a lot more strategy kind of involved in that. So therefore, there has to be measurement kind of that lines up with that, right? And so, but again, back to your question, we get a lot of that where a brand or a team will come to us and just sort of say, we need to some way or another justify this spend, because it's a big line item, on the brand's budget, and the CFOs are wanting to know, like, now, why are we spending all this money on having a partnership with this team? Is this actually driving revenue? And so there's more pressure being put on teams now to actually. So a lot of these contracts, for example, nowadays actually have measurement as part of the contract. That's relatively new within the last few years. And so we get kind of involved in all of that as a sort of a third party coming in and helping that process.
So are you assisting the teams in responding to brand contracts about the measurement component, or does it work the other way, or is it a little bit of both?
It's both. It's both. Yeah. We have, so one of the organizations that their presidents on our advisory board is Matt Yonan with Tigris Sponsorship and Marketing out in Denver. Mm-hmm. And so they do quite a bit of work, primarily on the brand side. They do a lot of work. And so we'll come along and help them sometimes with some of that. But then more and more, you're getting teams again, teams didn't used to have to worry about this. Literally a team, what used to be a team would just sort of give you at the end of the season, they tell you how many fans came in the gate, what the total impressions were. It's normally an intern that filled out that report.
And here's a picture of your sign. Thank you very much.
And that was it. And so nowadays, teams are being kind of required by the brands to be much more sophisticated in their measurement. And so that's really where we get involved. We being the Center for Sports Analytics, tend to work way more on the team side.
Yep.
than we do on the brand side. And you typically you're going to work on one or the other, and that's yeah.
Do you find that most brands come with a set expectations like, hey, here's what we need from a measurement standpoint. We need you to be able to activate that, or do they come to the team saying, what can you do to help us here?
Yeah, again, I mean, I can't give you exact.
Yeah, sure.
But I mean, I'm thinking in my head of a brand that we're working with right now and a team we're working with, and what that particular brand is wanting is so unsophisticated. and if I were to tell you the brand, you'd be like, oh my gosh, this is like
I'm never buying that again.
Yeah, Fortune 100 type company, and like all they're wanting to know is like, what is the level of brand awareness within the fan base? Like that is their metric they're asking.
Wow,
for.
yeah, pretty baseline.
And I'm like, and that has, literally brand awareness has almost nothing to do with the marketing objective that this brand's trying to achieve, right?
Right. Yeah,
So each situation is a little different. You got to really kind of dig in. So we're about to start a project with an NFL team up north, and we're going to be doing measurement around 3 of their big partners this coming season. So the very first meeting we're having is with all 3 of the partners to find out what is the marketing objective of these partnerships and how does this fit into your overall marketing strategy. And then we step back and develop the measurement around that objective, if you will. So,
do you find that most of those partners are able to effectively articulate what it is they're trying to accomplish? Is that a tough road, or most of them come with this pretty set expectations, well defined?
It's about 50-50.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, some do, some do, but again, and you ask yourself, well, why? Well, it's mainly because, again, you go back just 10 or 15 years, many of these companies that are heavily invested in sports marketing weren't. And 10 or 15 years ago, there weren't, marketing executives that were being trained in business schools weren't being trained in sports marketing. Yeah. So
it was just never a discipline.
I mean, we're really generating the very first group of sports industry executives that are trained to sort of think this way and can help a team think, a brand think about how does that sports sponsorship fit within the grand marketing strategy?
If I'm a brand and I wanted to get started using data and analytics more effectively, what should I not do? Like, what are the mistakes that brands and teams make when thinking about how to use all this data and analyze it effectively from what I perceive as my business outcomes? What are the challenges?
Yeah, well, the first step always is to understand what data is available to us, right? And then looking at that, what data might we also want to have that we maybe don't have, right?
Right.
So I'll give you an example. We did a project for a brand that was on an NBA jersey, the patch sponsor. And again, they were same thing. They were like, well, we want to know if this is working, and we spent X number of dollars. We want to know what our return on investment was, right? That's sort of what they came to us. Well, in this particular case, since it was an app-based company, they have certain types of data that other companies wouldn't have, right?
Yeah, I would assume so.
Yeah, so we were able to take that data and look like literally at the zip code level, day by day. Within the course of the season, we went back 3 years prior. We looked at 4 match markets, and we're able to model that data and figure out literally we could almost tell the company to the exact number of additional downloads they were able to get within the marketplace during the season. You could even see, like, at one point during the season, they did a big activation, and you could see the bump in downloads, in our model. And so and of course they know because they're the company what each download's worth to them, and they were able to do the math. And so that's just an example of that's each situation's unique and each situation's different. I guess that's my answer.
So, but it all really does start with knowing, okay, what do we got? Right. Yeah. From a data standpoint, what can we get our hands on? And I'm assuming the next point is, okay, what do we not have that we want?
Right.
And how do we get access to that? Ideally how the teams can do it? Are the teams, but I know that in the past, like, teams have been pretty protective of that data. Are they becoming more willing to share that with the partners to help them understand what the ROI is? Do you see that as something that's an opportunity, or is that a challenge as well?
No, that you're right. They are becoming much more willing because that's being talked about in the negotiations on the front end. So again, that was never really used to be part of the conversation, So nowadays it's when you're the property, you're asking for, normally a property is going to have some kind of an evaluation done on what the value of those assets are. That's what Tigris does quite a bit of that. Like they'll be able to say, hey, this this asset you have is worth X number of dollars, right? And then on the other side, you got the brand saying, well, we don't think it is. We think it's worth whatever. And so part of that whole conversation, though, is going to be measurement as we go through the process. And so the NHL team I mentioned that we're working for, it's in the contract. It's a 3-year partnership. The team has to have a third party, i.e. us, do the measurement each of those years and then present it back to the partner. And it's part of the process. And so again, back in the day, the property wants to do everything they can to make it look as positive as they can. And so they can like, oh, whatever.
Want to tell a good story here.
Yeah, exactly. So, so what's happened is it's putting more pressure on the property to make sure that they're activating in a way that's actually going to produce the results the brand wants, which is why we've moved from calling it sponsorships to partnerships.
Yeah, amen.
It really is a partnership now, right? It's a partnership between the two entities to make sure both entities achieve the objectives that they want to achieve. So,
and this is new territory for a lot of sports teams too, right? Because again, we not have to dive back into 15, 20 years ago, it was like, hey, you love sitting in the box for the baseball game. Come on, we'll spend some money, we'll have a good time, and have a great thing like that. This is new ground for a lot of teams, and I'm wondering, because you've mentioned you're working with all of the major professional sports leagues, both from your own experience and your students are working on projects and things like that. I'm wondering if what you hear and what you see from the different leagues, are certain leagues more adept at this than others? Can you speak to in generalities regarding that, or is it really just team by team?
It really is team by team, because even in leagues, there's big gaps and differences in terms of how analytics is used.
Yeah.
And I mean, so as an example, one of my students got hired, I guess that was 4 years ago, and he went to the Carolina Panthers, and his title was business intelligence coordinator. And to the best of my remembrance, he was the very first person who had a title like that at the Carolina Panthers. So again, 4 or 5 years ago, even NFL teams didn't even have business intelligence.
They really weren't even thinking about it.
And so we've got a student interning right now with the SEC, for example. And as best I've heard, he's the very first person that's ever been there that's his role, is business intelligence work. And so even your top leagues and teams are really just now starting to adopt and hire business intelligence trained people to help. So it's really, really new. It's a new frontier.
Do you feel like there's an arms race coming as more teams start to realize, and more leagues start to realize the potential here, that all of a sudden you're not going to be able to produce enough graduates to fill all the needs?
Yeah, well, that'd be a great problem for us, right? We'd love that.
Yeah, right.
I think you're going to see the same thing you saw happen sort of in baseball with Moneyball. Once they opened up that opportunity, and people start seeing the impact of it. You start seeing, and so most of your MLB teams have huge staffs of analytics people that work on the spin rates of the baseball and all that, right?
Yeah.
But I think you're going to see the same thing happen on the business side. And by the way, a third area that's coming is sports science analytics. I think that's a big third area. That's I'm wearing my whoop right here, right?
All right.
And so all the sports science data, all the deep science.
I got the Garmin on.
There you go. Yeah. And so I think those are really the 3 areas where analytics is impacting sports. And the Moneyball side is going like crazy, particularly in baseball. It's still getting picked up in soccer and some of the other sports. Business analytics and sports science analytics are in their infancy stage, but that's where the jobs are going to be in the next 10 to 15 years, I think.
As that starts to grow, as that continues to grow, right? You got people who are very capable in analytics and delivery. I'm interested in something that, it seems like you can't open up the paper today without reading about the impact that artificial intelligence has on this industry, that industry. And certainly I would imagine that's going to be the case here with your program and the focus of it. Artificial intelligence is already becoming so pervasive in our daily lives. And I'm wondering if you have some thoughts or insight on how that's going to impact partnerships in particular, from both the properties and the brand sites. I mean, what applications do you see coming in the next months, years coming forward? Well, I guess maybe with artificial intelligence, next couple minutes. Seems like it's happening so quickly. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, with artificial intelligence, in fact, it's interesting you say that. I literally just got through teaching a class in May, a sports marketing strategy class. And for the first time ever, because we have Chat GPT now that we didn't have just a year ago, we tried to incorporate that into our strategic planning process. And again, I know it's going to change, literally monthly, this thing changes, but kind of where we are right now with those sorts of tools is while they are great at maybe generating, get our thinking going, kind of move us beyond. You've had writer's block, right? Sort of like writer's block, kind of getting, sort of priming the pump and getting us thinking. But still, at the end of the day, I think it requires a human being with a much broader understanding of things, to be able to, the nuances, there's just so many other aspects that the human being is still going to be involved in that. And it's just, I think in my thinking, AI is going to be an important part of the process, but it's not going to be an end all be all. We're not just going to be able to go chat GPT and it's going to pop out an activation strategy for Coca-Cola and the Falcons that's going to make them $10 million. That's not. A human being's going to have to be involved in that, I promise you. So
yeah, so it's basically, but from taking the blank sheet of paper and putting some thinking to it, it's more along the lines of you still need the expertise and the background to shape that into something that has utility to it. So great from an efficiency standpoint to maybe get rolling, but still requiring the back end associated with it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how we used it in May. We had 3 projects we worked on in May with my students, including a project with a professional soccer team in England. And we did one with IndyCar. In fact, the IndyCar was really cool. It was first time ever in motorsport history. They've got a nonprofit as a naming partner for an IndyCar event, which is similar to St. Jude's, in golf. So we helped develop the strategy, the activation strategy for that. And to help.
And your phone is ringing off the hook right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then you got these guys with podcasts saying, talk to me. I mean, you're going to get some time to teach.
Yeah. No, it's fun. I love it. I wouldn't trade in for anything, but no. So but again, we use Chat GPT and some of those tools for the very first time ever, literally just last month. And it was very helpful, but it was definitely not an end all be all by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah. It's going to be fascinating to see how that evolves. And I guess it's sort of a natural segue into, with AI providing guidance and, all data and available and analytics that are available to us, is there still a place for trusting the gut when it comes to marketing? I mean, sometimes I know something, you just kind of see it and kind of go, not sure that feels right. Is there still a place for that?
Yeah, there always will be. It's the same with coaching. That's got your coaches out there that are just like, well, this is what the sheet says. It's 4th and 4, and I'm going to do it.
Right.
And that's not how analytics works. Like context matters. Like it does matter. And so, we have a coach down here in the SEC that does that all the time. He constantly makes, calls that you're like, what in the world is he thinking? And then it doesn't work. And then the post game, he's like, well, it was the analytics. And it's like, no.
Okay. You do have to look at it in the scenario, right? The sheet says 4 and 2, go for it, but my players are exhausted.
Yeah, exactly. And there you are. What is the flow of the game, and that's where the intuition comes into it. And so it's a little bit of both, and I think it's a little bit of both on the business side as well. You have to have that business acumen that's going to that's going to help you understand whether or not this is what the data says, but my business acumen says, well, I think we need to tweak this a little bit this way or that way, and that's I think that's the same thing on that side.
I'm glad you brought up the coaching side at this juncture too, because I want to touch on, I know we've been talking a lot about sports marketing and brands and things like that.
Yeah.
But I do want to talk about Project Samson a little bit, because I think this is actually pretty cool. And I'm going to read you a quote from Samford's football coach that they said about Project Samson, right? He said, look at the difference in us being near champions in previous years and conference champions this year is directly related to the benefits our team received through Project Samson. So what I'd like from you is, can you both define what Project Samson is and its goals for the university and what you found? I mean, some of the things related to just that.
Yeah, well, I'm first of all just honored that he would say such a thing like that, because that is validates our work. And I'll say 99.9% of the success of our athletic department goes to our coaches and our players. not to my analytics students, but I'm glad that they, that the athletic department is seeing that, the value that we're bringing. But no, we have a really unique relationship with our athletic department. It's in most universities, the academic side of the university and the athletics, they kind of warp, they fight each other.
Yeah, right. There's not a lot of crossover there.
No, and we've got major crossover. We're very integrated with our athletic department. Our students are over there all the time working with data and helping in all kinds of different ways. And in this season, the football team, of course, won a conference championship, but not only the football team, we actually won 11 championships this year, which was a all-time for our school.
Yeah,
we won the only Division I school in the country to win basketball, men's basketball, football, and baseball, all won conference championships, which is incredible. Plus, we won women's soccer, we won volleyball, and so we crushed it this year in all of our sports. And again, I think the athletic director, Martin Newton, and the coaches would say that Project Samson and the Center for Sports Analytics and the work we're doing is definitely contributing and helping us have just that little bit extra edge as we get on the playing field. And so that's kind of my little promo right there.
So what are some of the specific applications that you see for bearing particular fruit?
Yeah, so there's, again, sort of two sides of what we're doing. We have 3 students embedded in just about every team on campus, including, by the way, we also do some work with UAB baseball, UAB volleyball. We do our pro soccer team in town, our pro basketball team as well, but mainly our teams. So we've got a senior, a junior, and a sophomore, and they're analytics students, and they're working with 2 different types of data. They're working with the player performance data, i.e., how many passes did you complete, like all of that kind of stuff, like, player performance from that perspective. Plus, they're also working with all the sports science data that we're collecting from Polar, from Whoop. When they're in the weight room, we have it's like Star Wars, our weight room equipment. It's unreal. It really is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot get away. If you go in the weight room, you cannot get away with just sort of like going halfway. I mean, you can't do it. The machine knows.
It's giving you the feedback instantaneously.
Yeah, and the coach too, by the way.
Yeah, okay, yeah, there's that too.
and your teammates. So we'll bring in the O-line, and they'll all be doing bench press or whatever at the same time, and they're all on every rep getting feedback and knowing where they're rated.
Wow.
As compared to the others. So it creates competition, immediate feedback, and all of that. And so that data is so powerful. And then when you lay that aside, the data that we're collecting in terms of like recruiting data for which recruits should we bring in the transfer portal. We're looking at things like the team that's coming up. We're doing analytics on the upcoming opponent and trying to find like tendencies within them. And so that's more like strategy. So we're helping the team in multiple ways use data to be able to put the right formation, to have the right players, and then once they get there, to train the most efficient way possible so we can make them the best athletes possible. So when you put all that together, guess what? It produces 11 conference championships, in a season. And so it's just really neat that it's a learning lab for my students. So my students are...
Oh, it's so practical.
Yeah, and so they're getting to spend 3 years doing this stuff, and then when they graduate, guess what? There are all kinds of teams lining up that want to hire these students.
Well, I'm assuming that your phone is beginning to ring from other universities, other athletic departments saying 11 conference championships, give us a secret sauce. Like, how are you doing this?
Yeah, it is. But again, one of our advantages, I think, is because of the type of school we are. We're a smaller university, about 7,000 students roughly. Our educational model is very much experiential learning. It's small class sizes. It's professors who are kind of mentoring. So all of these students that are currently in these engagements in season, each one of them also meets weekly with a professor to kind of help them with whatever they're working on for that week. So, for example, I mentor the students that are doing soccer and volleyball and golf. They meet with me every single week, and whatever is the current hot thing that they need help with, I help them with that. So they're learning, with the professor alongside them. So all that to be said, not every university can deliver that because that's not every university's, educational model, but it is Samford. I mean,
you have the size and the capability to do it.
Yeah. And we're ranked number 1 in the nation by the Wall Street Journal. Got to put this plug in there.
Absolutely.
By the Wall Street Journal. You've heard of that, right? For faculty-student engagement.
Wow.
So the quality of the relationship. And so that educational approach allows us to do these sorts of real world, kind of learning with our students. And so big universities can't pull that off. They just can't. And so
Yeah, and that kind of is an interesting segue into the last question too, as we begin to wrap up here. And then, before I do that, I want to make sure I thank you for your time in doing this. But that kind of direct interaction and that kind of mentorship, it's clear that faith plays a really important role for you, both personally and professionally. And I'm wondering if you can provide a little bit of guidance or insight into how your belief has guided your development and your career as you've progressed to the point where you are at.
Yeah. I'm a Christian, been a Christian for, most of my life. And as a person of faith, one of the things that is super important to me is investing in the next generation. It's people, and so that's really why I went into this profession to be a college professor to begin with, and why I've coached for so many years, because I love investing in people. Right. And so in Samford is a place, again, it's all about that. We're all about people. We love our students. We love getting involved with our students. We love getting to know our students. And so when a student comes to Samford, I tell high school students this all the time. It's like, look, you're joining a family, whether or not you know it or not. You're joining the Samford Sports Business family. And it's a lifetime deal. It's not just
you don't get out of the family.
No, you don't. I mean, I've got one of my graduates speaking in my class on Friday. I've got another speaking the next Friday. You mentioned GMR earlier. Well, one of my students, worked there for several years. And so these are, I tell you, almost like my kids. I've now got like 200 kids that all work out in the world of sports, and it's kind of cool.
I appreciate that. And Dr. Darin White, I really appreciate the time. But before I let you go, I have to put you into the lightning round. This is going to be a series of questions, and I'm going to request, if not even demand, some short, efficient answers from you on these next few questions. Are you prepared?
I am ready to go.
Let's do this kind of thing. All right. You were recently inducted into the Union University Hall of Fame, so congratulations for that. What color is the jacket they gave you?
The jacket. They didn't give me a jacket. They gave me a really nice plaque, which is actually over this shoulder right there.
There we go. So no jacket. Well, maybe I'll give you a jacket for participating in this podcast. Next question. You are both a former soccer coach, also a pretty big soccer fan, I imagine. I give you 3 words to describe Lionel Messi's arrival in Miami to play for Miami. What are they?
They're epic, and epic. So, absolutely off the chart, unbelievable for Major League Soccer, for soccer in our country.
The data alone is already starting to be pretty amazing. You recently published an article titled, quote, "Team Loyalty and Intergenerational Influence, the Role of Nurturant Fathering in the Transference Process." Question, can you translate that into English?
Yeah, sure. So, and I'm going to do it super, super quick here. So
it's the lightning round. That's the only thing we take.
Yeah. Number one influence on your fandom, all the research shows this, is who your father was a fan of. Father is the number one influence. Okay. So here's the question. We know that. I mean, research has shown that over and over again. The question was, does the quality of the father-child relationship in the formative years, does that impact that transference of fandom?
That's such a better title.
Yeah, well, I know. There you go. But, we're academics. We got to make this sound really confusing.
All right, last question. The singularity is defined as the moment when the advance of technology becomes uncontrollable. As someone who works in data and analytics, can you please tell us when the singularity is going to occur?
Honestly, not something I ever really think about or worry about. So,
so the short answer there is absolutely not, and don't even want to think about it.
I love technology. I love the metaverse. I love all of it. It's awesome. Then bring more. Bring it on. I mean, half the world's
welcoming
dying.
The singularity. Here it comes.
Yeah, come on, bring it on. I mean, our human brains can handle it, I think. So
all right, so there's the good news from Dr. Darin White. Thanks so much for joining us, man, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the One-on-One Sports Business Conversations podcast. If you enjoyed it, we always appreciate a subscribe, share, comment, or like. And don't forget, you can always find past episodes at abcpartners.com/podcast. This podcast is written, produced, edited, and hosted by Dave Almy. And theme music was composed by Scott Holmes.